Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and I'm joined today by my sister. This is super fun for me. This is the first time I've had a family member on the call, besides my husband, of course, who comes on as a co-host sometimes. But my first guest family member is my sister, Heather Bull. How are you, Heather?
Good, Chanel. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's fun to do this podcast together. It's been hard to connect. You would think it would be easy, but we've had all sorts of troubles, but we're here and I'm so glad that we are. So let me tell you a little bit about Heather. Besides being my sister, we have 8 kids in our family. I'm the oldest. She's the second oldest. And she is amazing at what she does. So she is the owner of 2 companies. Oh, you're awesome. So she has 2 companies, one called Vision Interiors and one called Inspire Interiors. And she is the owner of those. And she's also the principal designer for both. Is that correct? Or just for Vision Interiors? Okay. And when you see her work, which I'll be sure to link to and post some examples on the Facebook page, you'll be amazed. Like, she does awesome things, and it's been so fun to see her develop this talent, as a big sister, to see how she's come up with these things. And then it's also awesome because, certain people, like, she just has this amazing ability to make things beautiful. And so I'm excited to learn from you today. And also, Heather has been married for, let's see if I know, 5 years. 5 years. Okay. And lives in Orange County, which is where we grew up, Orange County, California. So fun. Well, let's jump right in and start with your backstory a little bit. Tell us how you got into design.
Okay. So I don't know if we've ever even talked about this before.
Yeah. I know that you studied like clothing design in college, right?
Yes. Yeah, well, I actually, even before that, I don't know if you remember doing this as kids, but we grew up in a very small house, in a 3-bedroom house, and we had up to 10 people living there at some point. So we would always play a game where I would actually draw out floor plans and then say, what would we do to our house if we won $1 million? So just for fun as a kid, I started laying out floor plans and adding on to houses and trying to figure out where the staircase would be.
That's so cool. I totally did not remember that. How funny.
Yeah. So then I actually went to school to study fashion design. So I've always had kind of a creative interest. I didn't love the fashion design world. And so I sort of fell into an architectural design job working for a construction company. And I did that for 7 years. I was designing residential remodels. So additions, kitchens, bathrooms, all of that. And from there, I sort of segued into doing full design.
That's cool. I thought of another thing in your childhood that prepared you for this. I remember when you were young and you painted your bedroom. So, and it wasn't just like painted the wall. She did a full-on mural on her wall. So she was really into rainbows, and she did a full rainbow mural on her wall. So look at you. You started really young.
Yeah, I do remember moving our room around a lot too. I would always rearrange everything.
Yeah, that is so funny. So yeah, the seeds were planted very young with what you were going to do, even though you didn't know in college, but it all kind of set the stage at a young age. That's so funny. So anyway, tell us a little bit. So as you got into design, you've done lots of different things. So big things where you're doing remodels and kind of the architectural things. And then you also are able to do things like using more of like the decorating side of it, of, decor and mixing and matching. So all this stuff is really foreign to me and hard for me to do. I struggle with it. So for people like me, let's start with money, because that's a big thing. So a lot of times I feel personally constrained by like, oh gosh, well, if I had, $1 million, then I could do this and this and this. But because I'm on a budget, it's really hard to do things to my house. So can you tell us some things, both where it's a good idea to spend money and where it's a good idea to save, and then things that you can do on a budget?
Yes, absolutely. So I work with all sorts of clients, from, tear down new build to only people who need help with accessories and rearranging their existing furniture. So all of those things are very important in design. But I do think that accessories are one place that you should not get designer things. Accessories, to me, even on my highest end clients, I still shop at places like Ross and Home Goods for them, because they're little tiny things that could get broken easily, that can go out of style easily. So it just doesn't make sense. You can get a designer, let's say a little dog statue that's going to sit on a shelf somewhere. If you buy that designer, it's going to cost you $250. If you buy it from Home Goods or Ross, it's going to cost you $10 to $20. And all those little things can add up, but they do make a huge difference in the overall look. So that's a good place to save money, and also a good place to make a big impact for not that much.
I like that. And especially, I like, like you said, things like that can get broken. And I can just, as a mom, like, oh my gosh, the stress. If my kid breaks my $200 dog statue, which I would never have, by the way. But
I know.
Just saying, but if you break a $10 item versus a $200 item, the amount of stress involved there is huge. And then also, you kind of alluded to, you can change it up more often if you're not stuck in this style, because with the little things, you're able to upgrade. Okay, well, I'm not as into dogs as I was 2 years ago, so that can go out and I'm ready for something new. So that's a good thought there, a way to kind of keep it lower on the budget.
Yes. So another thing with accessories that even I do as a designer, it is nearly impossible to pre-plan accessories. So I go buy a bunch of stuff, much more than I need, from Home Goods, and I just play around with everything and then return what I don't need.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you just get anything that looks like it might go with your theme and bring it all home.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because as I'm laying stuff out, let's say there's a bookshelf that needs to be filled. When you're laying it out, it's all about balance. So as you're laying it out, you might be like, oh, I needed something that was tall and skinny here. And so it's good to just have a bunch of extra stuff on hand so that you can balance it.
Okay. That's a really, really cool thought that I wouldn't have thought of. So how do you, when you're going and you're buying all this stuff, you just kind of, like you said, get more than you need, but you have an idea. So you're thinking, okay, all the things I'll need for the bookshelf, or you're thinking whole house or whole room. How do you kind of plan that out?
I usually don't do more than one floor at a time.
Okay.
But let's say, just for your listeners, if you're doing one room at a time, then you think, okay, so what's my finish going to be? Am I doing chrome? Am I doing gold? Am I doing bronze? And then, what other elements do I have? Do you have natural woods in there? Do you have any pop colors? So say you're doing gold and blue and you've got natural wood. Then I would go and I would buy picture frames that went with that. I would buy little statues that went with it. I would buy little plants that tied in the theme and had a base that had the color in it. And also a bunch of extra throw pillows too. Okay.
Very cool. So back up for me a little bit. So this is accessories, but then you said when you're laying out a room, the wood and the color and the finish. So talk to me about that a little bit. Dumb it down for people who are not as design savvy. So is that kind of a first step, or where does that fit in?
Yes. So if we're talking about designing, let's say, a living room, the first thing that I would do, no matter who you are or what you're doing, is measure it and lay it out. And even if you're, on graph paper with a ruler, that's fine. But that's the number one biggest mistake that people make in getting a room ready and getting furniture for it, is not getting the size correctly.
Okay. Any tips on size, or what what do people usually run into that's a problem? Like you get something that's too big or like too big for the space or too small. So you just want to make sure it fills it properly.
Exactly. And it's just, I mean, there's not really a good tip for it, but if you're at the store and you see something, a lot of times visually in the store, you'll think that it'll fit your space because it's in this big warehouse, but you bring it home and it might not fit.
Right.
I've known people who didn't do that and they end up with sofas that actually don't fit in their rooms at all.
Okay. I can see that. Yes. I think that same thing.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Just laying it out is really important too, because you can also see holes in the layout that you need to fill.
Okay. So drawing it out on graph paper would be a good way to go. So just on paper, you want to make sure that you can see everything visually. Okay, I like that. And then you kind of have an idea of dimensions, like we need a couch that's about this big or an ottoman that's about this big.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Exactly.
All right. So first step, measure. Then where do you go from there?
Then you start looking for pieces. And if you are on a budget, I actually love Wayfair for budget projects. Okay. They have the best customer service and they sell all levels of brands. So if anything gets to you and it's damaged, they will ship out something new.
Awesome.
They also sell designer brands now as well.
Okay, cool. So you can really kind of go any budget with Wayfair. So that's nice.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So next step is look for pieces. And tell me about Wayfair, because are we just talking mainly furniture here that you're looking for, like rugs? I mean, all of it?
Yeah, you can look for rugs and art there as well.
Okay.
Like I said, with accessories, I wouldn't pre-purchase the accessories.
Okay.
Aside from pillows.
Okay. Cool. So talk to me then, or was there another step? If you have this all laid out in steps, then I guess we can go that way. So first you measure and then you look for the big pieces.
Yes, exactly. There are lots of different brands too, but just for thinking of trying to stick to a budget, Wayfair is a good budget brand. And they just have really good filters. So that's why that was my suggestion. If you're on even more of a budget than that, another great place that I like to look is garage sales.
Oh, cool. Okay.
They actually are better than thrift stores. You can get stuff for much better prices than you can at a thrift store, and you find more unique pieces. So if you've got more time than money, then that's a really good way to go. But just bring your measuring tape with you and know your dimensions, because you clearly can't return things.
Right. You get what you get at a garage sale.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but definitely for the bargain hunter, that is the way to go.
Yeah, it really is. And you can always spray paint things to get them a different color. You can, restain if you're doing a wood stain.
Yes. So, okay. Very cool. So that's a good thought there and a great way to save money. Okay. So after you have the furniture, what would be your next step?
So once the furniture is all in, including rugs too, then you move on to accessories. So this is for decorating, obviously not for anything like a kitchen or bath.
Right.
But yeah, once the furniture is all in, you move on to the accessories and you just play.
Okay. So cool. So somewhere in there, so you measure, you get the big pieces, then you get the accessories. Somewhere in there, you're deciding a color scheme and patterns. And as you know, that is something that is really hard for me. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I described my process, but I didn't give any of that. So, I don't know if you are familiar with Houzz.com. It's Houzz.
Yes.
But it is a great place to look for pictures of things you like. So before any of that design, any of the layouts and accessories, all of the furniture selections, you need to figure out what your style is. So you can look through there and you can make idea books. It's very similar to Pinterest, except it's only for house things.
Okay.
So you can search, say that you want a coastal look. You can search, beach style and living rooms. And then it'll pull up a bunch of pictures and you can save ones that you like. You can also save things that you like about them. So sort of the beginning is just sort of deciding what look you like.
Okay. And I don't know why, but that just seems so hard to me. I guess it's hard to narrow it down. And then my other problem with that is like, when I do find something I like, I'm like, okay, yeah, I like that. Let's have that room, and it's totally different dimensions. It's completely different. So I have a hard time translating what I see and what I like to make it realistic for my budget, for my room, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. So what I make all of my clients create an idea book or a grouping of pictures that they like. And then once they do that, I sit down with them and I go through and I look for themes. So say every picture has a white sofa in it, or a large amount of pictures have a white sofa. There's a high probability that is what they're being drawn to. Or say there's a lot of dark woods, dark, rich wood bookshelves and things. And that's probably what you're being drawn to. And as someone who's not looking for this all the time, you may not notice the similarities between the pictures. But if you get a whole grouping and then try and look for similarities between, then you can sort of narrow down things that you like color schemes, wood tones, all of that.
Oh, that is so smart. I love that because like you said, you might not see the patterns. And for me, for someone who isn't inclined that way, I don't. But to have, all these, once you're flipping through, like, oh yeah, every picture does have a white sofa, but I have 5 kids, so that wouldn't work out for me. But but in another life,
most of your listeners don't want that.
Yeah, maybe not a white sofa. But yeah, as you're looking through, then you can kind of see. So do you have how many, when you're asking clients to put together these idea books, do you ask for a certain number so that the theme can kind of pop out? Because if you've got 2, it might be kind of hard to see, what's tying them together.
Right. No, I don't. I asked them to make a grouping per room, but usually clients tend to come up with somewhere between 12 and 30 pictures. And I think that's probably a good average to look through and just try and see the patterns.
Yeah.
There's also another thing with color psychology, which is kind of important in determining your color scheme. This is probably too in depth that most homeowners would never think about, but I always do. Specifically one combination. You should never put red and yellow together. Red and yellow actually is a combination that makes you hungry.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay.
That's why all the fast food chains use that color combination.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's something you might just like that color combination and not really think about, about that. So that's totally interesting. Are there others that you know of?
Yes. So blue is the most common favorite color, and blue is a very calming color. So if you want your house to have a nice calm feel, blue is probably your best bet. And then green is the second most.
Okay. Very interesting. So if you have kids that are really wild, then you want to calm it down. Green and blue might be a good way to go. Yes. Okay. We grew up in a white house. Our walls were mainly always white. So,
but all of our carpet and our couches were blue.
That is true. And our curtains too.
I guess. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Look at our parents. They're so smart. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. So let's go ahead and talk to us a little bit about, so we've got color and we're starting to talk about that. Talk to us about patterns, choosing patterns.
Okay. So this is a difficult thing to do, especially for if you're trying to put multiple throw pillows, or if you want a patterned chair and you can't figure out what throw pillow to put on it. A lot of people tend to default to having solids and patterns together. But the way, and that's obviously the easiest clear cut. Yes, you can put a solid and a pattern together. But when you're mixing patterns, it's all about the size and the scale. So let's say you have a large print pattern, you can combine that in a pillow on, say you're putting 2 pillows on a sofa. You can combine a large scale pattern with a small scale pattern, and those can work together and not fight. If the patterns are too close in size, then it won't work.
And you're talking about here 2 different patterns. So you're not talking about like a chevron that's really small and a chevron that's really big. You're talking about 2 things that are totally different, like a paisley print and something else.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's super hard. But so the colors, you want them kind of to go together?
Complement.
So complement, but not match.
Yeah, not match. They can either pull from each other. Like, say, for example, you've got one that has it's got a blue and yellow pattern in it.
Okay.
And then your next one has a yellow and white pattern that's a much smaller scale. That can work together.
Okay.
You just need to sort of tie certain pieces in.
Okay. And I can picture it like, when I see work that you've done, or I'm in a model home, I see how it goes and I'm like, oh, that looks so good together. But for some reason, when you're trying to come up with it, that can be really hard. So any tips for that process of trying to come up with it? I mean, I guess you already gave us one idea, is to like look at pictures of what people have already done.
I mean, other than the scale, the other thing is make sure that there's enough contrast. So they need to complement, but there has to be enough contrast in them still, that they don't look too much alike. So, say you have the scale correctly. One of the patterns is big, one of the patterns is small, but they're both blue and they're slightly different colors of blue. That won't work. You actually probably should go to a full other side of the color wheel. So if you're pairing from across the color wheel, like blue and yellow, for example, can work well together.
Okay. That makes sense. So you don't want to go too matchy-matchy. It will not look good.
Exactly.
Okay.
That works for wood tones as well. So say you have a wood floor and you're looking for a wood furniture piece. You don't want it to be completely the same color as your floor. You need it to contrast either darker or lighter.
That is so interesting. So see, that is something I would not have thought of. So that same thing applies to wood. Very interesting. Okay. This is good stuff. Yeah. I'm learning. Okay. So another thing that you do with your work and that you have done is to do, full remodels, and you redo everything in the house. And so, like you said, sometimes you're tearing down and starting over. For people who don't have the money yet, and that's in their future, but say people are dealing with small spaces, how can they make those small spaces look bigger? And when they're stuck with kind of what they have for now?
I am a big fan of sectionals instead of sofas and then love seats, or sofas and chairs, because you can actually get a lot more function out of your space with a sectional, even in a small room.
Okay.
One thing that most people don't realize is chairs at a diagonal take up a lot more space than you would think they would. Anything at a diagonal really does. So accent chairs are nice, but if you have a small room, you might want to do a sectional, and then instead of having 2 chairs at a diagonal angle towards a space, have 2 separate ottomans, because then they won't close off the space and they don't take up quite as much room because you can set them straight instead of at an angle.
That makes sense. And then is the opposite also true? So if you have a big space that you're trying to fill, it might be a good idea to do stuff at a diagonal?
Yes, but not necessarily. Okay. So chairs with a diagonal is always a really nice look. And accent chairs are always really fun because you can get another pattern introduced in there, or another color. But I still, unless it really goes with the room, I don't love bookshelves at a diagonal because there's a lot of lost space behind them.
Cool. Any other tips for small spaces?
Oh, yes. So if you are used to having your media center and all of your components in, some sort of room in the living room that you have to see, you don't actually have to do that anymore. So if you have, let's say, a kid's closet or a guest room closet, hall closet, something behind your TV that you can store those components in, you can actually drill a hole through your wall and run a small cord that is, you can't even see it. You can tape it to the side of your TV and you can get a nice looking narrow furniture piece underneath instead of having to have a big clunky media center below.
Okay. So, and that's kind of a new trend. I know builders are doing that more often because like we bought our house, it was built in 2003 and there's sort of a nook for the TV. But nowadays, when I look at model homes, they're not really doing that nook anymore. You can put your TV anywhere you want.
Right. I do love putting TVs above fireplaces. And if you have the ability, it depends on what type of fireplace you have. But if you have a setup where, say, you have a fireplace and then next to it you have a nook, which, you know, for about 30 years is how they built houses. You can also do the same thing and drill a hole. If it's a gas fireplace, not a masonry fireplace, you can put a channel through and have cabinets on the side. Oh. So that you can still do it and still run that wire. So you can shut the door and you don't have to have access with a remote. So you don't have to see it. I think that's also probably great for having little kids because they won't get at the electronics as much.
Yes. Anything that you can hide away so that toddlers can't get to is definitely a good thing. Well, cool. We are about out of time. And so I'd love it if you would give us any final kind of tips and tricks.
Well, one thing that I was just thinking of right now for people with kids that I love to do, if you're doing some type of built-in cabinetry, you can make something look like it has, like it's doors, but it can actually be on wheels and roll out and be sort of a hideaway storage for kids' items. So that if your friends are coming over, you can throw all of it into it and push it back into the entertainment center. So it looks like it's completely hidden. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of those lately. I like trying to make things as functional as possible for people's real lives. Another really important thing is odds. Having things in odds like light fixtures or trios of things on a bookshelf is always more pleasing to the eye than evens.
Okay. So, and that applies to accessories and lights and pretty much everything across the board?
Yes, with the exception of, I'd say, accent chairs.
Okay. That makes sense. Cool. All right. Well, I think you've given us lots of good, actionable tips that we can do. And, you know, really, we all want our homes to be beautiful. And there are things that we can do no matter what our budget to make things look nice and to be appealing. And I have one final question, and then I want to make sure we get your info for the listeners. But I heard a long time ago that you're not supposed to decorate with family pictures. Now, is that an old rule? I've heard it said, and then I've seen things done differently. Is that changing?
Yeah, I would say that's an old rule. In my design, I actually don't use a lot of family pictures for other people, but I do a lot of gallery walls. So they're in certain areas. What I would say is don't have it be too cluttery. But if you're doing a bookshelf, you have picture frames. Why not use family pictures? I'm a big fan of pictures in general. So while I don't want to put them all over people's houses, I do think it's really important to have your memories up.
Okay. I always thought that was interesting. Like most people that I know do have their family pictures up. And then, design magazines and things I've read say, oh, don't decorate with your family pictures. So I like what you're saying, kind of in between, you can still get your family memories because we want to show our family. We love our family. So it just makes sense. Well, tell people how they can get a hold of you, especially if they are in the Orange County area, and then also how they can see your work.
Okay, so you can I have two websites for each of the different companies. It's Vision Interiors Group and Inspire Interiors Group. And I've got all of my portfolio up on there on both of those sites, as well as on houzz.com. And that's HOUZZ.
Cool. Okay. Well, I will be sure to link to that so you guys can see some of the work she's done and get some good ideas as you go and decorate your own house. So Heather, thank you so much for being here and for teaching us. And I really appreciate it. And it was fun to talk to you.
You're welcome.
And thank you everybody for listening to Moms Who Know. Subscribe to Moms Who Know so you never miss an episode, and join the conversation on Facebook at facebook.com/Moms Who Know podcast.